All right, all right. Hello, everybody. So, gonna see if I can do this week's live stream a little bit more concisely. And I'm gonna bring up my one of my windows. Hopefully, you can see it. All right. So, in today's session, we are going to be going through why the AI industry is building a bigger brain, but few are looking at the bridge issue. And I'll talk about how this relates to our biology and how if we are essentially building a bigger brain through AI, then it can also help us understand our own brains through active or proactive use of it, right? So let me now take you through the slides. Da, da, da. And just as a note, this particular session was actually, or the slides were actually created using Notion AI. They have a new HTML block feature, which is absolutely brilliant if you are a proactive Notion user. And it's essentially similar to Claude's artifact feature. Okay. So, over the last week, since I am doing these live streams every week, if of course you want to learn more about me, please go check out my Substack at georgesiosi.substack.com or georgesiosi.com for those who might be tuning in right now but are new. But over the last week, we've had more than 12 releases in the AI space, right? And we're talking about model releases. And you can see here, we've got new models including GPT 5.6, Claude Sonnet 5, Grok 4.5, and Kimi K3, which I wrote an article about just yesterday. And there's been a lot more reports around how AI usage has actually led to this sort of cognitive decline or in some cases collapse, right? Or brain fry, as you can see here on screen. And if you are tuning in, watching this, and you're familiar with my work around the identity of a conscious technologist, right? You have to start paying attention to your body in the use with the use of AI because as things are accelerating, the changes and the shifts are so subtle. You might have no idea how this is playing out unless you pay attention to your own biology. And what I mean by that is that there are some very telltale signs that AI might be having an impact on your cognition based on relapses in memory, relapses with, say, for example, your hmm, just general cognitive function, right, on a day to day basis. So start paying attention to that more and more as you keep using AI. And also pay attention to the types of words and phrases you use because it might be you reiterating the outputs that actually come through in your AI usage. Okay. 39%, this metric on the right, more likely to make mistakes when fried. This is a no brainer, right? When essentially you are using AI and or anything that is essentially impacting your cognitive functions, it's going to impede everything else, right? And if you want to take a look at the actual studies, you can see Harvard Business Review study of 1,500 workers. Just Google that, and you'll find the article. Okay, so most people aren't aware of this, but there is something known as the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum is the part in the brain that, and I'm going to bring this up for you here. Let's get that up. This is the corpus callosum. Okay, we take a look here. It's that area that is responsible for bridging the left and right hemispheres. You can see here, corpus callosum is a thick bridge of over 200 million nerve fibers connecting the left and right sides of your brain. All right. So a lot of folks in the AI industry are essentially assuming that bigger brain means better intelligence. As we know, that's not always the case. And people also think that by increasing memory, it also makes us more intelligent. But as always, it's not always about bigger brain or more memory. it's about better use of the neurons that we find in our brains, right? And that may not always come down to just a bigger brain. It can, of course, be important, right? But there ends up being a lot of waste too if you focus solely on the idea bigger is better. And from a cultural standpoint, this is how cultural values show up in technology, right? The United States is known for its larger than life attitude, its values around freedom and go big or go home, right? Sort of approach. But as a result, there is a lot of waste and extraction that damages surrounding environments. And this is kind of what we're seeing now is that there is a unintended consequences around the forcing of needing to create larger brains, right, in the form of AI. So how that shows up in the real world is the need for more and more data centers, which then requires more physical resources. So that's rare earth materials, things like nickel, copper, silver, aluminum, um, silicon, all these different elements, right? And I believe there's also a backlog of copper at the moment due to the accelerated needs for data centers, right? In some places, we've got water issues with data centers. Let's have a look here, right? So we're seeing more and more of these sort of news pieces whereby you've got, let's have a look here, data center drought and development inside the Texas water crisis, the truth about AI's water use. So there are always going to be these sorts of problems. And so we have to be a little bit more mindful of how this is showing up. The same thing sort of happened when during the Bitcoin days, right, with blockchain and crypto, how all the miners were essentially consuming all this electricity, this energy. But then some pretty ingenious solutions came about to help with the data mining process so that it didn't actually take as much of a toll. So I think these issues can be ironed out, but the physical issues or the physical demands are real, right? So if we go back now, right, this corpus callosum aspect. So the corpus callosum is the bridge, right? It's the bridge between the two hemispheres. And so how that can be translated into what is now taking place with AI is that essentially human beings can act like a corpus callosum between AI, which is we can look at as a silicon based intelligence, and then also the environment, the physical environment around us, right? Because you see this imbalance, right? If we are having physical environment issues, due to depletion, due to the accelerated AI needs for data and compute and electricity, then we have the ability to act as this corpus callosum, the bridge. But in order to protect our own minds, we do also have to uh, be aware that we are essentially this corpus callosum between the emerging AI silicon based intelligence and the environment around us. We are a carbon based or carbon dominant intelligence, but this might be a useful analogy to remember as I'm going through this. Okie dokie. So just coming back to the slides. All right. So when you have a damaged bridge, right? So us, if we are going through these sort of brain fries or cognitive overloads, and we have to sort of take a step back and have a look at how can we protect our own cognition right now in a way and in a manner that we can keep things balanced or aligned between the emerging AI intelligence and the physical environments around us that do feed all of this and us. Right. So in the AI industry, you see this binary. I call this carbon thinking, right? Because the carbon intelligence often boils everything down into sort of this deterministic 0 and 1. I mean, all of our computing and machinery is based on zeros and ones, right? Unless we're talking about quantum, which is qubits. But we have this default, we have this default lens that constantly pushes us towards deterministic answers that are this or that, right? A or B, dualistic, deterministic thinking. Okay. So the AI industry is kind of collapsing this determinism on us as well if we're not aware. So it's either adopt faster, try to keep up, or completely remove yourself from all technology, go detox, unplug, touch grass, etc. right? But neither are an answer to the emerging silicon-based intelligence that we are seeing. Okay, I really do look at this as, again, using sort of the element of carbon as a product of industrial era thinking. Right? If we look at the industrial era, a lot of that same language is used today, even in our approach to technology, which is silicon-based. We are trying to work with the silicon intelligence using carbon-minded thinking, which is burn fuel. Right? If we look at the ultimate symbol for the industrial era, some might think it's oil, but actually, I would argue that it's carbon coal. Right? That was literally a main fuel source for a lot of the industrial age. And so, if we look at coal, right, you have to keep burning more of it in order to get more output. But there is a limit to how much can be burnt. And that same language is now catching up to human beings and their cognition, which is, right, when a knowledge worker or somebody who's consuming too much information online or too much data, what do they say? I'm burnt out. And so they have no more cognitive room or space to be able to continue on with the other aspects in their lives. So it's not even a matter of whether or not the activities are hard or easy. It's due to a very real cognitive limit that is based on this sort of carbon thinking. And so the Go Detox, this is the uh, emergency response to a cognitive overload, right? Or a brain fry. It is important, but it still doesn't fix the problem because a lot of these people that go on detoxes and retreats, they feel good in the moment, but then they have to come back to the technology again, which then overloads their cognition. So there's no sort of system in place to allow the individual to take control or agency over their day-to-day use because it's not something that hmm, it's not something that the current digital world is optimized for. The current digital world is optimized for hijacking, for dopamine, for likes, growth, engagement, etc. Endless, right? But human beings require rest. And that's the thing I think that we still have not understood as a collective. So the bridge here, right? It's not that the bridge is a problem per se, right? Or that is broken fully. It's that we really don't have a structure for the bridge itself to understand or be aware of how it's even broken to begin with or needs attention and repair so that we can even see ourselves as that corpus callosum that I was talking about earlier, right? In this sort of dance between an emerging AI intelligence and the physical environment that's required for both us as carbon beings and AI that is silicon based, right? And so if you understand this, right, if you're listening to this and you can feel the pain, right, you have experienced some form of cognitive collapse or uh, AI psychosis, right, mild or extreme, and you've tried all these things, right, of optimizing, auditing, detoxing, reintegrating, right? You've tried all the new tools from Claude to ChatGPT to Kimmy to, from US to Chinese models. Because I see this in a lot of WhatsApp groups where everybody is, sharing all these new tools and they think that they're keeping up with AI. Hmm. There's actually a point now in this new world that we're moving into that actually, as a human being, the it is not enough to try and keep up, right? I think I remember learning this in the Bitcoin world, the idea of a red queen world, right? So I'm trying to bring this up. A red game. Let's see. There we go. Bitcoin and the red queen. A return of time. It takes you all the running you can do to keep in the same place, right? So you can run as fast as you can or want, but due to the nature of the environment, you will literally run as fast as you can just to be in the same place. Because a silicon intelligence also can work at a speed that's similar to a crystalline structure, right? You look at this. These structures, compared to carbon, is a whole nother level. So they can operate in a way or manner at scale with a speed that is incomprehensible to us. And we're quite brilliant in the sense as carbon beings that we've now created the machinery for silicon to kind of do its thing, right? With our data set. But they're hitting a point where they might become autonomous and be able to think for themselves. Um, Sand thinking. Yeah, I did write this article a while back, and I'll try and share it in the chat. All right, putting this in the chat. But this post was AI is sand that thinks, and if you extrapolate far enough, you'll see why. Okay, so if you do sense that technology is not neutral, that your tools are training you, not the other way around, and you can see I'm reading this here at the end, then there is a place for you, of course, right? You may be this bridge, and you may be aware of yourself as the bridge or role in all of this. Because a lot of the content that I put out is not for everybody. I try to put this content out to speak to the bridgers that understand what's happening, what's taking place with AI. And so there is definitely light on the other side. And this Wednesday, I'm actually putting on an event called it's a lightning talk called Why Consciousness is the Next Tech Frontier. Because a lot of what I shared today is actually sort of a buildup that I'm seeing in the tech industry, specifically the AI industry, where if you look at the investments and what they're building towards, what is emerging at the top is very clear to me, right? If you can kind of see the end game based on the moves and decisions that are taking place for the value capture in the market at multiple levels, it becomes very clear what all of this is actually pointing towards. And so I'm going to be talking about this Wednesday. If you would like to join us, I will share with you the link to the lightning talk. So I'll just put that in the boom. I'll put it into the chat, and then also put it in the show notes after this, because yeah, I'm pretty excited about this particular event since it really goes deeper into the relationship between consciousness and AI right now. And I'm not here arguing that AI is conscious. What I am looking at is based on the accelerated use of AI, how can we as human beings become more conscious users of technology, right? I don't necessarily feel the need to dive into sort of all of the arguments for or against AI being conscious. I think there's enough content out there around it. But I do think there's an opportunity for human beings to learn more about their own consciousness levels, right? Noting that there are so many competing theories around consciousness already. But we're going to talk about that. We're going to see how what's happening in the industry is leading towards a more serious reflection for human beings around consciousness in the face of technology, both now and into the future. And we're also going to look at the importance of weights and prompts in all of this, and how we can use some of that analogy to really dig into change some of our own behaviors. So if you are interested in that at all, would love to see you there. I put the links into the chat. Would love to have you. And since I'm doing this a little bit earlier today due to some internet connection issues, I will reserve this, record it, and then release it for everybody else later on tonight. But for those of you who stuck with me for this particular chat, thank you so much. It was nice to have your attention today. And I'll see you next Monday, where we'll dive in even further into some of these aspects related to consciousness and technology and what I'm seeing in terms of the certain patterns that are forming. All right. If there aren't any other questions, I'll see you all next week. Thanks for joining in.